What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again. Reviewing Destiny 2 Forsaken is somewhat of a bittersweet task, where The Taken King was the first steps in the actualization of what Destiny as a franchise could become. Destiny 2 in its initial release and subsequent DLCs felt less like a sequel and more like a dollar bin knockoff. Some might even say a cheap cash-in. This ultimately alienated longtime fans and hurt Bungie's brand and reputation, and that will be a reoccurring theme throughout this video and in my closing comments. Forsaken is great, but even broken clocks are right twice a day. I'll state it up front, Forsaken as an entire package is quite possibly the best place Destiny as a franchise has ever been. Is Forsaken perfect? Oh hell no. What it has done is manage to capture that sort of meandering charm that gets more right than it gets wrong. That sort of charm that made Destiny 1 feel much like a diamond in the rough. And through this review, we will cover those flaws. But categorically, Forsaken is the best place Destiny, not just Destiny 2, has ever been. And I absolutely have no words to tell you how good it feels to say that. As a Destiny fan, as somebody who has spent the better part of a year criticizing the idiot direction and choices that Bungie and Activision have taken with the Destiny franchise, it feels good to say I like playing Forsaken. That said, now let's go ahead and take a step back, because it's important to frame the context of the Destiny Forsaken is hoping to fix. I know I have a year of videos covering this, but it is important to understand this moving forward, and because every video is somebody's first. Don't worry, I'll just be doing the back-of-the-box preview version of this, not the whole year-long saga. So, Destiny 2 has been plagued with issue after issue after issue since release, hell, since before release. Unable to capture the spark that made the original a flawed but very beloved game. With Destiny 2, Bungie threw 3 years of improvements and learning and content out the window because, reasons? Instead of building upon what they had created like their contemporaries did with Warframe and World of Warcraft, Bungie decided to make Destiny reductive, stripping away what little complexity existed in its RPG super light systems and replacing talent grids with perk pools, removing random rolls in favor of static loot, gutting lore, in favor of half-assed, juvenile at best, high school level Tumblr fanfiction writing that was insulting in how easy it was to follow, even when you're not paying attention. With Destiny 2, Bungie took Destiny 1 and gutted everything that made Destiny 1, Destiny 1, and sold us this designed by committee shell of something that felt so focus tested, but only focus tested, never played past the honeymoon period. Something created to get good reviews. And it did. But it didn't play like it was played by people, tested by people who loved the first game. It didn't feel like it was made for anyone who loved the first game. It was a joyless sort of endeavor that latched onto the fads of things like Overwatch and Call of Duty, but not what made Destiny 1 so special. This committee designed this game in a way to gravitate towards the elusive casual audience and hope that they could retain them and they could take enough of their money that it would be lucrative to do so via their lucrative microtransactions that, with Destiny 2, ceased fulfilling its advertised purpose, what they were originally designed for, paying for events and regular content releases and updates, and just turned into a second avenue for Bungie to make money. And according to Kotaku writer Jason Schreier, that was always the intent with Destiny 2.
What they did was, and I reported this on Kotaku, what Bungie decided was, we can't do this anymore. This is just too much. This is too hard for us to do. The tools that we work with are really hard to deal with. It's hard for us to make this much content. It's just hard making content in general. And they said, we are going to do a drip feed of smaller stuff, and we're going to put up the Eververse, sell microtransactions, and make money that way. And Activision said okay. It was part of their renegotiated deal.
There, of course, is nothing wrong with Bungie wanting an extra stream of revenue. But lying to the player base about the scope and scale of what Eververse covered, while gutting cosmetic content that we'd previously been able to earn, through endgame activities and locking it behind the cash shop in a $60 game with a $40 season pass, a $40 expansion, and then another $30 season pass. So like I said, lying about what Eververse was created to do, on top of a full budget game with full budget DLCs, on top of controversy after controversy, with things like throttling EXP gains, with the hope that they could get into the headspace of the more gotta catch 'em all player base, and force them into buying things with anxiety, which apparently is pretty fucking common, and scratches the same itch that gambling and slot machines do. This is a serious issue that people have, and it is extremely manipulative and predatory when Bungie or any company takes advantage of that. This predatory tactic, on top of a really bad initial release, on top of lackluster DLC, on top of lackluster DLC, and then taking mythical characters from the lore like Osiris, a worm god, and a Bray, and turning them into nothing more than the victims of bad Tumblr fanfiction. Destiny 2, for the majority of year 1, even with all the changes and updates and improvements, was nothing more than a hollowed out corporate designed by committee version of a game that somewhat resembled Destiny if you had no idea what Destiny actually was and you squinted your eyes and turned your head to the side. And the community was not happy. Longtime streamers and YouTubers left or started covering other things. The population hemorrhaged. Content creators like myself were left constantly astonished by how much worse everything seemed to get. Just when it seemed like we'd hit bottom, the bottom would fall out and it would keep going. Simple things seemed missed, like mass shader deletion, which still is kind of not a thing. And it felt like Bungie, contrary to their "we're listening" stance, had their head too far up their asses to hear anything. And Destiny 2 seemed like a rotting carcass on life support. Forsaken is then bittersweet because in many ways, it is the natural evolution of what Destiny 1 should have been, should have become, only mired in the controversies of the last year. Some might find it hyperbolic or disingenuous to say, but Forsaken is the product of a year-long $100 beta, which has indeed followed the $170 Destiny 1 beta. What happened with Destiny 2 should not have happened, and it is categorically unacceptable. So I think calling it a beta is a fair critique, as Destiny 2 was in continuous development, not development for new content, but development to make the game functional until Forsaken. Forsaken is categorically what Destiny 2 should have shipped as, for better and for worse. Because whether we like it or not, Forsaken will have many of the same growing pains any new game coming out has. Growing pains we could have dealt with over the course of the last year and move past, but we'll now have to deal with because the idiocy that was Destiny 2 Year 1. It would be easy to mistake my scathing condemnation for Bungie's last year of content as my review for Forsaken. The opening of this video is merely to illustrate the last year that Destiny fans have gone through and the world that Forsaken is releasing into, and the continued responsibility that not only content creators have, but fans of the game have to, no matter how much you're enamored with Forsaken and what it is now, to remember that just because Bungie fixes something doesn't mean they won't turn around and break it. And we have to remember that. We have a responsibility to remember that. Now, I'm all for forgiving, and damn if I'm not a sucker for a redemption story. But we have a responsibility to remember, to look at any future changes with skepticism and without the benefit of doubt, as Bungie simply hasn't, even with Forsaken, earned that back. Now with that long overview of the last year and the current state of affairs that have led us to this moment out of the way, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, I proudly present to you my review of Destiny 2 Forsaken.
This is awkward. You got a gun I can borrow?
No. But I do have a bullet with your name on it.
Any second now, my partner is gonna roll in here and kill every last one of you. And you, my man.
This is going to hurt. A lot. Any last words?
How's your sister?
Now let's go ahead and move past the usual platitudes of the sound design is great, and subtle things like the ace of spades going from one firing sound to another when its exotic perk is procced, or just the awesome animation that it has when you reload it. Or all the really cool chattering that accompanies reloading it. Overall, sound design is great as usual, with the only hiccup being Nolan North playing Nathan Fillion playing cayde 6. It's close, it's really, really close, but still somewhat distracting. Nolan North, who turns in a great performance in his own right, is just not quite Nathan Fillion. He's trying. Damn it if he's not trying, and it's really good. He's really, really good, but it's still just not there. It's also somewhat disheartening that in a mission that is clearly designed to be a love letter and a send-off for cayde 6, they didn't bring back Nathan Fillion for whatever reason. I've seen some places say that he was never contacted for it. I've seen other places say that it was scheduling problems. Point is, Nathan Fillion did not reprise his role for cayde 6, and he's the guy that basically created cayde 6, or the cayde 6 persona, and it was super disappointing to not see him reprise his role in the last iteration. But like I said, to Nolan North's credit, he turns in one hell of a performance. For me, however, it's just off enough to be distracting. Also, the skyboxes are simply amazing, like usual, and so are the environments. The art team really did a lot of heavy lifting to make the presentation of this DLC really good. The story team, however, I guess they just couldn't be bothered to bring their A game to the table, as the story of Forsaken is a mixed bag. A really, really mixed bag. The campaign, which is entertaining enough and made up of several different parts, I found for the most part was highly enjoyable. But the story starts to fall apart under light scrutiny, particularly the end, where the story unceremoniously shifts its direction from a spaghetti western in the vein of Magnificent Seven, Seven Samurai, A Fistful of Dollars, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, with some Mad Max and Kill Bill thrown in there for seasoning, to a high fantasy space opera with space elves, and a city ripped right from the pages of Lord of the Rings. While this mixture of high fantasy and Wild West post-apocalyptia has always been a feature of Destiny, the story transition is just jarring. 1 second it's a western, a tale of revenge, striking out on your own to kill the man who killed your friend and mentor. And then suddenly it's not, and it's never even really been. Even when you finally get to Aldrin, killing Aldrin and taking revenge has actually taken a back seat to this sudden B plot, which has apparently been orchestrating the A plot the entire time. So a story of revenge was actually just a story about saving the Queen of the Awoken and the Dreaming City and killing a wish dragon who'd been taken, and then really that was just actually the catalyst for another story, which is about how Savathun and her daughter Dulin Kara, the Eternal Return, and Aura Blade Transformed have taken the Dreaming City and locked it into an endless recursion of time. And to be fair, I actually do like aspects of all of these plots. But it does reek of way too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think with some better writing, some better foreshadowing, some better transition work, and I don't know, maybe an editor, it wouldn't have been so jarring. This is made all the worse by the fact that several important things are not actually explained in the story, like the setup for the entire story. At the beginning, we see a prison riot.
This isn't a prison riot, it's a prison break!
The way that the game and the marketing presents it is Cayde or someone has imprisoned a bunch of fallen barons, and Uldren is freeing them to get them onto his side. Kind of. There is this line.
No, Cayde, he's gone!
See, this is that bad writing that I'm talking about, where Bungie, or the writers at Bungie I should say, try to obfuscate something obvious or something we're about to find out anyways with mystery, because they think that's clever. But really, this could have meant anyone, like the Fanatic. Now, we know, or people who have played this game, or people who are watching this video who haven't played the game, now know that she's talking about Uldren. But really, at the end of the mission, when Uldren kills Cayde, you really have no reason to believe that. More so when Petra is talking to Cayde, and Cayde is the one that originally imprisoned Uldren. So why not say Uldren is free? Why not add more context? It's not like this is a shocking reveal as Uldren kills Cayde, and it's the first thing that we see.
Any last words?
How's your sister?
See, what the in-game story doesn't tell you is found in Grimoire 2.0. This is somewhat of a mistake that Bungie keeps making. They keep confusing what needs to be in the game as story-relevant details and what is fluff. They keep mixing up the fluff for the crunch. Uldren, who's basically lost the plot since Taken King, put a pin in that, keep that in the back of your mind, it will be important later, took over the fallen House of Kings and united all the fallen houses under one banner. House Dusk. Not because he was a badass like his sister and defeated the Kell of House Kings by right of combat and royal lineage. No, literally because he was pathetic. Also, for those of you wondering why we've never been made a Kell given how many Kells we've killed, apparently you have to have royal lineage and royalty understands royalty? Royalty finds royalty? I don't know. Uldren then gathers the other houses, like I said, and then, because reasons, betrays them after coming upon an Archon Cayde had eviscerated with his golden gun. Dying, Uldren kinda starts to help trying to heal him and bandaging his wounds, and then cries. He cries this Archon back to life. And then somehow also magically taints his ether, which gives him the power to revive the dead. Now, of course, not all of this is need-to-know upfront information, and can be stashed away in the lore tabs. But, you know what is need-to-know information? I wonder how that prison break started. Maybe, just maybe, we should have seen Varix, the guy who started the prison break, orchestrating the prison break, and then show Uldren escaping. Because that's exactly what happens. I think that's kind of an important detail. Knowing that Varix betrayed us, and knowing that, like, up front, or knowing that Uldren was a prisoner of the Prison of Elders and not just breaking a bunch of fallen barons out of the Prison of Elders, and knowing that Cayde was responsible for putting him in there, well, that would have dramatically recontextualized a lot of the stuff that we see going on. This scene, for example.
Any last words?
How's your sister?
Is actually about Uldren taking revenge on Cayde for Cayde putting him in prison. Not because Cayde was in the wrong place at the wrong time and he's just being a sacrifice to the barons that Uldren has to make, or any of the other stuff that people thought was going on before Forsaken came out. This scene would have also been much better if it started with the psychosis, with Uldren seeing his sister and seeing her whisper in his ears, and Uldren reprimanding Cayde for imprisoning him, giving context to the execution. Instead, we get Cayde asking Uldren for a gun, and Uldren's idiotic comeback.
Well, this is awkward. You got a gun I can borrow?
No. But I do have a bullet with your name on it.
Any second now, my partner is gonna roll in here and kill every last one of you.
I'm just saying, with more contextualization, the story could be better. Which brings us to this exchange.
He had the worst jokes. Even worse timing. I wanted to laugh. I really did. We should have been there. This is not your fault. This is on the head of Uldren Sov. But if he thinks what he's done is the end, it's not. It's the beginning. We're going to fight him. Do you hear me? All of us, every Titan, every Warlock, every Hunter. We will take the Reef by storm. And then, we will mount the head of that son of a bitch on his precious throne. For our fire team. For Cayde.
No,
What did you say?
we are not an army. We are not conquerors. We are guardians. We need to keep our eyes here. On our home, our people, the traveler. The reef was lost the moment it lost its queen. So if another Sov wants a stretch of lifeless rocks, let him have it.
This is Cayde we're talking about. For us to do nothing is
Say it.
cowardice.
I refuse to bury any more friends.
You won't have to. Uldren Sov is mine.
I honestly don't know how to feel about this exchange. I like the music, the setup, the payoff, the one time in 3 that our character's voice is actually used in this DLC, but this dialogue, it just feels so unnatural. Like, more so than normal.
But if he thinks what he's done is the end, it's not. It's the beginning.
Shouldn't it be just the beginning? That sounds a little more natural, I'm just saying. And Ikora's response, while perhaps a bit over the top,
We're going to fight him. Do you hear me? All of us, every Titan, every Warlock, every Hunter. We will take the Reef by storm. And then, we will mount the head of that son of a bitch on his precious throne.
is an accurate one. Sure, we don't need to send everyone, but this would be the geopolitical equivalent of one world leader walking up and assassinating another world leader. That demands a response, but then there's Zavala's reply.
No,
What did you say?
we are not an army. We are not conquerors. We are guardians. We need to keep our eyes here. On our home, our people, the traveler. The reef was lost the moment it lost its queen. So if another Sov wants a stretch of lifeless rocks, let him have it.
You fucking what, mate? Play that back?
So if another Sov wants a stretch of lifeless rocks, let him have it.
So what you're telling me, Mr. Vanguard, Mr. We've stepped into a war with the Cabal on Mars, so let's get to taking out their leadership one by one, that this time, when an attack on the city has been made against leadership of the city, we suddenly don't have the resources anymore to take out enemy leadership and potential threats to the city. Like the Barons. Then again, this is the same sort of shafting the Titan Vanguard gave the last Hunter Vanguard, Andal Brask, when he was killed by Taniks, and it took them forever to get around to sending us to go kill Taniks. Kinda seeing a pattern here, Zavala, but I digress. Uldren made a huge move going against the city by killing the Hunter Vanguard, and he has Barons. Fallen Barons, which would like nothing more than to kill, rape, murder, pillage, and destroy every human in the city so that they can get the Great Machine back. We know this. So it kinda seems like going after these guys who were bold enough to kill the Hunter Vanguard kinda comes off as a preemptive strike. You know, that thing, the thing that the Vanguard does, the exact thing that the Vanguard started doing under Zavala, you know, after the Battle of Twilight Gap, to make sure that the Battle of Twilight Gap or something like the Battle of Twilight Gap never happens again. But suddenly, the Vanguard doesn't do what the Vanguard does. Okay, no fucking wonder we haven't made any progress, even though we've killed multiple gods at this point, of reclaiming the Sol System. You know, humanity's home system that is overrun by the darkness, the fallen, the cabal, the hive, taken. It just seems like the setup at this point is driven by gross, plot-driven incompetence. What this conversation puts on display is this sort of idiotic lack of logic or plotting when it comes to setting up these DLCs. The entirety of this DLC is about us hunting down Uldren. So it's not like we're not gonna do what's on the box. Then again... But, we'll get there in due time. Now, this might come off as nitpicking to some, but really, this is the narrative framework for the story. This is how they decide to start things off. And we're running into leaps of logic that make absolutely no sense. It's like, nobody asks simple questions like, hey, isn't hunting down dangerous threats exactly what the Vanguard does? It's like the writers just saw that they needed to get from plot point A to plot point B with a dash of, wouldn't this be cool? Which, in writing, is the most dangerous thing that can happen. And in Forsaken, the wouldn't this be cool mentality happens a lot. We see it with Cayde's death, which is actually unnecessary to the story. And we see it here with this mentality of, wouldn't it be cool if we were going rogue? Wouldn't it be cool if we went against the Vanguard's wishes with absolutely, positively no repercussions whatsoever in the story? Yeah, that'd be cool. It's like everything in between plot point A and plot point B is just incidental, it doesn't matter. Like, there's this big argument made, and what happens to us for violating the Vanguard's orders to stand down? Nothing. At best, we have this moment where Zavala is just kind of disappointed in us.
I thought you'd be gone by now. I would attempt to dissuade you from your course, but it would only insult us both. As it stands, we've got every available Guardian dealing with escapees from the Prison of Elders. It's still not enough. If you go to war with the Reef, it's a war you will have to fight alone. The Vanguard cannot help you.
And then it's just business as usual. Also, we've got every available Guardian dealing with escapees from the Prison of Elders, which Uldren and the Barons just so happen to be? Maybe maybe then going after them is something we should be doing, because we've got every available Guardian going after escapees from the Prison of Elders. But hey, fucking details. My point is, if everything's gonna be just business as usual, what's the point in trying to forbid us from going after Aldrin? Why not just state, okay, not everyone can go, not everyone should go, but we do have a Guardian with a few god kills under their belt, and maybe, just maybe, they'll be looking for revenge. You know, a compromise. Not everyone, but not no one. This lapse in critical thinking when it comes to the plot points will happen a lot. It's the sort of, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, and there definitely is not an editor involved. Things just sort of happen in the story of Forsaken because the plot demands it to. Not because it's the natural evolution of what came before, you know, cause and effect and all, but because plot. And you'll see that as we continue. We then cut to Aldrin meeting with his barons. This is when we get the motivation for everything that Aldrin is doing.
Yes, I am humbled by your gracious acceptance. Marasav, my sister, your queen, may be gone. But she is with us now, and always. As for you, my friends, my barons, you embraced me when I was cast out. And for that, I gift to you the bounty of the Tangled Shore. Go, unleash upon the fallen chaos.
By your grace, Father.
You would be proud. The Reefborn's love for their queen remains undiminished.
Love is fleeting, but devotion, now that is forever. Not one of them has ever shown more strength of devotion than you, my dear brother. The Awoken cannot be trusted. You and I know that better than anyone. Together, we can bestow upon our people the fortune they so richly deserve. Extinction.
That's a really beautiful cinematic, shot pretty awkwardly, all things considered, because Blur usually has really well done cinematics. But in this one, everybody just kind of stares at the camera and spouts exposition. That said, we've got to talk about the second issue I have with Forsaken storytelling. And this is more of a product of Bungie continuing to fail when it comes to explaining things, but Unlike the recontextualization of Varric starting the prison riot or Uldren getting his revenge against Cayde 6 for imprisoning him, which can be found in the Grimoire, I could not, after scouring the Ishtar Collective and looking up everything about Uldren that I could find an answer to why Uldren was tainted by the darkness.
Oh, Uldren, you have sacrificed like no other. You looked into an abyss, bowed to false kings, and suffered uncountable betrayals. You were humiliated, imprisoned, manipulated, taken, and still you gave up everything because you love.
Now, you may look at that and go, hey, Joker, there's your answer. He was taken. Yeah, but do they mean taken as in taken by Oryx? Or do they mean taken as in taken to the Prison of Elders? Because, let me tell you, not only is there no reference to him being taken in the Grimoire, not as far as I could find at least, but he's been cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs since the Battle of Saturn. Also, Uldren just doesn't look the part of taken. This could be an artistic choice. Yes, I know he has the seething darkness all over him, but Taken have a very, Taken look to them. The seething darkness is also more in line with what we see with Awoken's skin, where it has the seething light, so I don't think he's Taken. I think that this darkness may be a product of Awoken being both light and darkness, and depending on their actions, can go dark side or light side really easily. The Awoken lore makes a point of this balance. It's all over the place. And it's treated as if Awoken have multiple personalities, and that the personality we generally see is the balanced personality. But it can go light side or it can go dark side. At least that's the implication that's made. There is a third possibility, but it does seem like somewhat of a stretch. In the Grimoire 2.0, there's a story about the first time that Uldren went to the Black Garden, and it's possible that he brought something back, but all of that is purely conjecture on a plot point that should be fairly clear. We also run into an issue with Uldren's delusions. These delusions are being sent to Uldren by the Queen's pet taken shape-shifting Ahamkara. That's a mouthful. The only question is, how exactly is Riven contacting Uldren? Now, there are pieces of lore that outright state that even a small bone fragment of an Ahamkara can grant wishes. That's how Eris escaped the Hellmouth. But we don't know how Uldren is being contacted by Riven. We never see Uldren with a piece of Ahamkara bone or anything of the sort. Now, there very well could be something in the lore that I've yet to see. The game is ever changing at this point, which is really cool, and there's new things happening all the time. But the in-game story never tells us how Riven is contacting Uldren. How is she sending him these delusions? He starts seeing them almost immediately after the Queen's believed to be dead. And it's not like they have to do this big thing of exposition. Hell, you could just have Uldren clutch a Ahamkara bone. Maybe he has it around his neck as part of a necklace. It's a tooth or something. Done! There you go. Uldren has a tooth of Riven, so they're connected. Dun dun dun! Plots that make sense. These two plot critical points, these two things that are driving our antagonist to action, only seem to be suggested in lore, and not outright explained. And it's never explained in game, which is a real problem, and would still be a problem even if they did explain it in the lore. And what's not explained seems to go hand in hand. I mean, Uldren, possessed by the darkness, is hearing the call of Riven, gathers the Fallen, starts raiding the Tangle Shore, and then at some point creates the Scorn, and then is captured by Cayde and in prison, which kicks off the beginning of this story. This is all sort of important information. No, you don't have to have large exposition dumps. It's called ambient storytelling. Maybe you have a scene at the beginning of the game where Varric is looking at Uldren in his cage, and then the power goes out, Varric disappears, the door opens, and Uldren is free. Maybe you even have Not Marazov say something about it, as Uldren reaches down around his neck and clutches a tooth of an Ahamkara. Ambient storytelling, see? Now we have everything we need to know, except for the darkness part, up front. But you can't have a story where stuff like this isn't mentioned, or the player isn't cued in on it. That's not being good. That's not mysterious writing. Mysteries only matter if the mystery is solved by the end of the story, not left hanging. The way Forsaken presents Uldren's quest is very much in medias res, and that's fine, but not telling us what's going on is not. Many of Forsaken's plot points feel like we've entered into the middle of a very important conversation with no real explanation of what's going on, but we're expected to understand it nonetheless. The story as is still pretty simple and very easy to follow, but every once in a while you get these things that it just seems like the writers were like, oh, well, they wanted more mystery and more complexity, so let's just, I don't know, have something randomly happen and not tell them why. That's not complexity. That's just bullshit. All of that said, I still find the story somewhat enjoyable. Just not these parts. And I really like these cinematics. Blur, the studio behind creating, directing, storyboarding these cinematics, have once again done a lot of heavy lifting in the story department for Bungie. I absolutely love this sort of twincest Game of Thrones vibe from the Queen and her interactions with Uldren, which isn't reality, it's Riven showing Uldren what he wants. That's kinda creepy, but it's also really awesome in a creepy kinda way. And you definitely get the vibe that if the Queen wanted to go all the way tonight, you know what I'm saying? Uldren would be down for it, which is kinda creepy, provided that's not already going on. But I digress. Getting back on topic, I like the framing for most of these cinematics, and I love the use of music in them. Like, I had a problem with this cinematic and how they're always talking to the camera, but this use of music right here,
You would be proud. The Reefborn's love for their queen remains undiminished.
Love is fleeting, but devotion, now that is forever.
ooh, just right in there when it starts like doing the Queen's theme, just right in there. It's so awesome. I even really like the somewhat uncanny valley nature of the Queen and how the Queen looks. And it's just like, you look at her face and something's not quite right. On top of the most awkward, like, bend me over the table and fuck me face ever. Like, literally, her face is doing that the entire time. And then you take this, which is the delusion, which is what Uldren wants, and compare it to, say, Marzov's last appearance in Taken King, where she was softer, she was cuter, definitely more feminine, where this is definitely more kind of sadist, something's not quite right there. It's awesome. I love how this is like Uldren's vision of his sister. Blur really doesn't get enough credit for how masterfully executed their cinematics are. They do a tremendous job. I don't think we'd be having the same conversation about this story if every cinematic looked like this.
We're going to fight him. Do you hear me? All of us.
As opposed to this.
Now that is forever.
That being said, her doing the weird face creepy thing where she stares at the camera instead of staring at her brother, it's still weird. Blur, come on, man. Like, come on. Great work. But that cinematic right there, you had so many great things, and then you had your characters talking to the camera. Ouch. Film School 101, dude. And since we're talking about studios who won't get the recognition they rightfully deserve, High Moon Studios are the ones responsible for the Tangled Shore part of the game from what I understand. And this is where the bulk of the A plotline takes place. And the better part of the story. At least the part of the story I think most people end up enjoying. The setup is relatively simple. Uldren has unleashed the Barons on the Tangled Shore to cause havoc, as he enacts his plan to go to the Watchtower and open the door to the Dreaming City. An act he believes will free his sister. So after air quote going rogue and having a very emotional conversation with Banshee, which honestly is one of the best parts of this game.
Memory ain't so good these days, but Cayde. Never forget Cayde. Hunter through and through. Left all his worldly possessions to whoever finally took him down. Don't know about you, but rather lose every last memory in my head than know that little prince holds Cayde's prized cannon. The Ace of Spades. You gotta promise me, put Uldren in the ground and get the Ace of Spades back. If anyone should have the ace, it's you.
So that's the setup, right? Go to the Tangled Shore, hunt Aldrin down, make him pay for what he's done, put his bitch ass in the ground, and reclaim the Ace of Spades. Upon entering the reef, we are introduced to this new character, known as the Spider. He's this sort of fallen Jabba the Hutt meets Tony Soprano amalgamation. I love how just clearly untrustworthy this guy is, but if you scratch his back, he'll scratch your back, as long as it's profitable. So, you do some free labor for him, and he tells you where the Barrons are. And again, more credit to Blur. I absolutely love this cinematic.
Oh, you really showed them, didn't you? Piece of advice, eh? Know your enemy before you deal with them. Rexisvan, the hangman. A silent sadist, used to dock the arms of dregs with its bare hands. Cannix, the mad bomber, emphasis on mad. Demolitions expert, with an irritating way about him. The trickster, Araskis, a liar and a schemer. Friendly advice, trust nothing she touches. Hyrax, the mind bender, has a rep for manipulation, has a morbid obsession with the hive. Yavix, aka the Rider, the leader of a bombastic gang of pike-riding heathens. They sow chaos everywhere they ride. The rifleman, Pirha, the only fallen alive who can make the shot that mortalized Cayde 6. Elikris, the machinist, scourge of soulless descent. This one sits atop a trove of tech and heavy armament stolen from me. The fanatic himself, Fikrul, the leader of the Barons and the first of the Scorn. His dark magic has no place on my shore. No place. Last, and most certainly least, Aldrin Sov, traitor to his people and the man who pulled the trigger. He may be in the wind, but his barons are ripe for the picking. Divide, conquer, isolate Aldrin. He'll wind up at your feet, and all you have to do is pull the trigger.
Funny. The line between light and dark is so very thin. Do you know which side you're on?
Huh. That was kind of prophetic. So that cinematic, just thematically, right, is awesome. Not only do you have the Wild West lawless frontier motif, but Cayde was all about cards and gambling, and this hunt for Aldrin is kind of a gamble. So just again, I really like this cinematic. So good. Blur, once again, great job. So the hunt is on. Instead of Destiny's traditional, click this story mission, then click that story mission, then click this story mission, then click that story mission, linear line of progression, the Tangled Shore is open to the player, and the player is allowed to hunt down the Barons in any order they want at their leisure. Granted, there's a light level suggestion that sort of hints at an order, but you're free to tackle these as you see fit. My only real issues with the Barons is 1, we don't get to spend enough time with them. They're just awesome. And second, they don't really live up to their gimmicks sometimes. Some do, and when they do, it's an amazing encounter, but other times it's just like, you go in there, you kill a big boss, rinse, repeat. For example, you have the Mindbender. I love this guy. His story is essentially he was a dreg, and his group of Fallen went to the moon to find ether, and they found only death, well, with the exception of the Mindbender. And this guy went places. He was a small, timid dreg lost in the depths of the Hellmouth, and he scoured the world's grave for knowledge. Only then could the following transpire. He learned to crack the layers of understanding that barricaded the known universe from the ascended plane, which was something the lore says was impossible. Until it wasn't. The Mindbender succeeded where few have. He created his own throne world, and took the Brood Queen as his consort, and a knight as his familiar. This weak, timid Dreg became so versed in the sword logic and Hive Arcana that not only did he seemingly without a worm symbiote warp reality and create his own throne world, he married a Hive broodmother, one who is one of Savathun's generals, and in direct communication with the Hive god I want you to think about how badass this little Dreg is. And his fight takes place in this Hive biome, on this crashed tomb ship in the Tangled Shore, where you find out he's controlling Hive, and then you call him out in the ways of old and kick his ass in his own throne world. A throne world that was helped in its expansion by the death of Cayde 6. The other Barons, you got the Racer, you got the Trickster, you've got the Mad Bomber. And while these fights end in the traditional Destiny slugfest with a big bad boss until you kill him, at least there's a theme to them. Unlike some of the others where it really is just one big bad slugfest. So the Baron fights are a mixed bag. Some of them execute very well on what's promised. Others, not so much. They don't even try it. For example, the Mechanist. This fight, I think about it and it still pisses me off. So you build a tank. You build a tank at the beginning of this fight, only to, just before you enter the boss room, no longer have access to the tank. What? You could have done something really cool with that, but nope, it's a big kill the boss slugfest. Of course it is. This mixed bag of boss fights culminates in the end of the story mode, which brings us to the steps of the Dreaming City, and quite possibly the absolute worst part of Forsaken. Something that I think universally left most people playing Forsaken saying, what the actual fuck? This is also when the game starts to stumble really hard, because it's switching its story from a nice romp through this Wild West setting, where, you know what, the Baron fights may have been a mixed bag, but at least they were kind of amusing. There's some cool set pieces. The story, while not perfect, had character, and dare I say, it was fun. Sure, it still delved into high school level fanfiction cringe writing, but hey, at least it had personality and a little bit of charm this time. But then we get to the Watchtower. Now this mission actually starts off pretty great. It's an all-out assault on the Watchtower. You fight through hordes of enemies, or you can just run past them in traditional Destiny fashion. Petra has a bombing run that makes for a great set piece. And then you get to the gates of the Watchtower, and you have your fight with the final Baron, which is actually one of the weaker fights in Forsaken. But he is just a gatekeeper to the real fight, to Aldrin. So you get to the Watchtower, you get some lore.
This crystal doesn't match anything in the city's geological database.
It wouldn't. You'll see.
It's very old. Is it from before the collapse?
Just after. It was planted to commemorate the arrival of the Awoken.
If you're playing an Awoken character, you get this really nice shout out to the fact that you're an Awoken.
Welcome home, cousin.
You start jumping between realms.
It was planted to commemorate the arrival of the Awoken.
And then everything starts to sort of build up and unravel. So when you're jumping through the Ascended Planes, you hear Aldrin and Marazov talking.
Obey me. Free me, oh brother mine.
No! Something's wrong!
So Aldrin's panicking, he's screaming, something's not right, and we get this, oh brother mine. Ah yes, Ahamkara you say, well, first you had my interests, but now you have my undivided fucking attention. Then we cut to this.
You brave, devoted, pathetic
all that screaming and anguish that we heard from Uldren earlier doesn't really seem to affect what's happening here. Also, they start to set up an Ahamkara fight, which, okay, if you take the entire story as presented and say that the voice that Uldren has heard the entire time, which it is the Ahamkara trapped in the Dreaming City wanting to be freed, then you know what, fine. This is the culmination of his quest, and we have to stop an Ahamkara from being birthed into our reality. Okay, not the final boss fight I think a lot of people wanted, but the final boss doesn't have us fight an Ahamkara either. So, no darkness-infused Uldren, like we were promised, and no Wish Dragon. No. We're robbed of two, count it, two really cool boss fight ideas, and we're given the fucked up Flipper Baby amalgamation of what looks like a hentai tentacle monster, a herpes and gonorrhea infested vagina dentata, and a servitor, who, promptly, after being birthed, vores Uldren. And then we fight and kill that. And then we have a conversation with Uldren.
The line between light and dark is so very thin. Do you know which side you're on?
And then it fades to black. And then we shoot him. What? What? Really? They literally had two routes they could have taken. We could fight an Uldren souped up with darkness powers. Or he opens the gate to the Dreaming City and Riven comes through. And we fight Riven kind of the way we fought Oryx in The Taken King, where we fight him back into his throne world and then we have to go into his throne world and permanently kill him in the raid. Or why not both? Just before Uldren opens the door, we fight him, and between his fighting with darkness and our fighting with the light, it still creates the key that is needed to open the Dreaming City, and just as we defeat Uldren, Riven comes through, and we fight Riven back into the Dreaming City. But not permanently. We haven't killed Riven, we just fought Riven back, to be killed at a later date within the raid. But no, nothing that creative. Instead, we get a warped servitor vagina dentata who vores Uldren. That's what we get. That's what the geniuses on the writing team at Bungie came up with. Yep. People were paid to do that. People were paid to script that, to model that, to CGI that, to choreograph that, to program that. Just wow. Because, like I said earlier, not only was the story okay, and this mission in particular starts off pretty well, but when jumping from the closing A plot to the rising B plot, which was the main plot of Forsaken all along and will be the main plot of Forsaken for the next year, they dropped the ball. Not only did they drop the ball, they tripped over it and fell flat on their face. Which is also sad because both the A plot and the B plot have a lot of good to them. And it seems like nobody thought out this final encounter, or they overthought it to the point of robbing players of really meaningful and impactful resolutions. It doesn't even matter if this was satisfying or not. It doesn't matter if you feel betrayed for Bungie making you kill Uldren, or if you feel great for killing Uldren here. The plot had already lurched at breakneck speed off a fucking cliff and was careening towards the ground. The final boss fight, I think everyone can agree, was disappointing, and the cinematic execution of Uldren was just an afterthought. The death of Aldrin starts us to the B plot, which the main plot revolved around, and is the plot for the endgame. I find many aspects of this outright amazing, by the way, if not a little wobbly in execution. Once you kill Aldrin, you'll be given the task of forging a key to enter the Dreaming City, the endgame space for Forsaken. The Dreaming City is simultaneously somewhat the most alive location Destiny has ever created, and also the most void. It's one of the most beautiful, but also somewhat one of the most boring. The Dreaming City has stuff. It looks like people live there, but it doesn't feel lived in. It's kind of a jarring juxtaposition. Like, it's dead, it feels like a set piece, right? Like a stage. And yet, it's probably one of the most alive places we've ever gone to. For example, patrol beacons are awoken soldiers who need help.
How you doing? The Taken corruption is spreading across the city. Aim well and push it back.
They can even die, and then you'll get a quest where you go and hunt down their killer. This is the most NPC interaction we've kind of had in Destiny. There's puzzles, there's secrets, the Dreaming City has its own loot pools, and yet, the Dreaming City is probably one of the locations I find myself getting bored with the easiest. Perhaps it's because the space is both large and small, but made artificially large by the fact that there's no fast travel. And traversing the Dreaming City can just be an inconvenience. So everything's just kind of annoying to get to. Sure, there's some portals, but I find those a pain in the ass to seek out as well. And yeah, it's just artificially large for no reason. That said, I really do love the idea of the Dreaming City. The Dreaming City being this endgame location with puzzles, with challenges, with things to discover, like the first dungeon that Destiny's ever had. An almost raid difficult experience, but one that is well above my level at this point, but looks really cool from everything I've seen about it. And the Dreaming City was designed in a way to immediately reflect player action. After the Last Wish raid was completed, a curse descended upon the city. Now, this curse added a bunch of new things to the city. First, there's way more Taken, and the biomes of enemies seem to rotate. So one week an area will be Taken, another week it'll be Hive, another week it'll be Scorn. A couple of the secrets shifted locations, and a new questline opened up, on top of a new strike. And the Dreaming City is on a 3-week rotation, so at the end of the 3 weeks, there will be content that is locked off to players. But with the restart of the cycle, the quests become available again, and they have new dialogue. At least the time that I did one of the quests twice, I got different dialogue. First was the original quest dialogue, and then the second time was dialogue that acknowledged that this was the second time that I'd done this quest. Of course, the premium endgame activity in the Dreaming City is the raid, which I've yet to run at this time. I'm not leveled enough to do so, nor the people that I normally raid with. So, when we get there, it'll get a review of its own. I did, however, watch the Race to Worlds first, and I did like how the raid seemed to be a good balance between mechanics and boss beatdown, something Bungie's been trying to balance since Taken King. And of course, I would be remiss in my duties if I didn't talk about the new Grimoire 2.0. Lore in Destiny and its presentation still has a long way to go. It's a bit of a mess. But at least, at this point, hey, it's in the game, right? Now, what do I mean by it's still a mess? Well, lore exists in 3 places. You have the old lore, which is only still around thanks in large part to the efforts of third-party sites like the Ishtar Collective, an invaluable resource. Then you have the Grimoire 2.0, which contains mass amounts of lore, and then you have the weapons and armor lore tabs. Now, I can understand why Destiny 1 lore isn't in the game. Fine, fair enough. I have to imagine that that would be a huge undertaking, just to even categorize. But, for example, why isn't there an exotic lore section in the lore book? Instead of aggregating everything in one place, if I want to read lore from exotics, I've got to exit the lore book and either A, own the exotic, or B, go into the exotic section and then hold down the trigger to read the lore tab. That may not seem like a lot, but if you're gonna go through the trouble of making a lore book, it should probably be all-encompassing. And the same goes for any legendary gear with lore tabs. Only worse because I have to specifically know what I'm looking for. There's not just a section where I go, yeah, if I go into that section, I'm going to have a lot of lore that I can go through, like the exotics. No, you have to know what you're looking for when it comes to legendaries. Now I understand that there's sections and subsections within the collections tabs that'll speed up this process, but why am I in the collections tabs to find the lore when there's a lore tab? Look, I'm ecstatic that the lore is finally in the game, but the implementation leaves much to be desired. As for the content of the lore, like with Forsaken and like with Destiny 1, where you have a bunch of writers writing a bunch of different short stories and aggregating those short stories in a collection that becomes the Grimoire, it's very hit and miss. I enjoy most of it, but every once in a while I'll read something and I'll just roll my eyes. I'll be like, this is fucking stupid. Who let their kid write this? I haven't read everything, so I won't speak to continuity errors, but there's some really great stuff in the lore and some kind of amusing stuff, like that one time the Queen of the Awoken summoned Shax by warping all of time and space and reality for a booty call. Like, that's just funny. Is it juvenile? Is it kinda Tumblr-esque fanfiction? Yes, but at least it has the decency to be super blatant about it, so you can't really be mad. And then there's another set of lore cards where it starts out from the perspective of Eris, then it changes to this AI Medusa, then it changes to Dul Ankara or Riven or Savathun, it's kind of unclear, then it changes back to Eris, and there's a ton of information in these cards, but none of it's good. None of it's usable. Like, it talks about the difference between Ahamkara and Worm Gods, except we're being told this by an unreliable narrator. Even the debate of whether this is Savathun or not, even the debate of whether this lore is true or not, what's correct, what's not correct, is the point of the book. The debate is the point of the book. The wondering and the questioning is the point of the book. Because in doing that, in having curiosity about this book, in wondering if this is true or that's true, or who's the real author, you're worshipping Savathun. That's awesome. And I've already seen people point to this book and go, well, this explains this, or this explains that, and I'm like, yeah, but no. You're being tricked, and you don't know it. And that's awesome. But then we get some weird shit, like either A, your kid is writing this, or B, you are trying way too hard. Like this one entry, where Uldren starts tripping balls in the middle of a conversation. Like, this acid trip of his, this Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas inspired trip of his, takes place in an apartment laundromat with a Vex selling laundry detergent, but the Vex has a face in its stomach instead of the radiolorine fluid, and then some fat Cabal woman is sitting naked in a bathtub, cleaning herself with a wire brush. The acid trip ends with the line of, his dryer ran out of time, but his crows were still wet. As if somebody's supposed to say, dun dun dun, at the end. Like, somehow that's ominous, like that's the scare chord. Like, his dryer ran out of time, but his crows were still wet. Dun dun dun. Lightning crackle, lightning crackle, lightning crackle. So yeah, like I said, the new lore, like anything aggregated like this lore is, some of it's good, some of it's really good, and some of it's like, yo, you're trying a little too hard. I did for the first time when it comes to Destiny lore find, I don't know if I would call it bad lore, but God, after a while, if I wasn't bored to tears reading it, we get the entire history of the Awoken. Cool. But like, 1 minute, it's this like arduous explanation of stuff, which, okay, I can deal with, I like that. And then the next, it's a soap opera, and it just goes back and forth between this, and it overstays its welcome. Like, the Book of Sorrows didn't overstay its welcome. This feels like it's like 3 times as long as the Book of Sorrows, with half the relevant information. So yeah, like I said, twice now. Very hit, very miss. Now that we've talked in length about the story of Forsaken, there are a couple things that I would like to take a brief, well, about as brief as 3,000 plus words can be, moment to talk about everything else. When Destiny 2 released, everything about the game from Destiny 1 had been dumbed down. The biggest casualty was the weapon system. Not only did they strip away the power fantasy by forcing players into a 2 primary system, a system that was clearly designed for PvP, and one that made the game artificially slower, on top of abilities being nerfed into the ground and ability cooldowns being ridiculously long. This artificially slow gameplay basically destroyed the Crucible, and pretty much everything else. And these systems, over the course of Destiny 2's lifecycle, have been changed and tweaked, but the largest change came with Destiny 2 Forsaken. That was the weapon system rebalancing. And while it's not perfect, it is an interesting compromise. Now, some people might think I'm crazy for liking the current state of the Crucible, and while I do think that there are some things that function in the extreme, like some of the shotguns have extreme range, this is quite possibly one of the best iterations that we've seen of the Crucible since taking King. But I will agree that there are some things that really need sanding down, desperately need sanding down. But not too much, like just the rough edges, like just a little bit. In other good news, random rolls have made a return with an interesting twist. Not only do you have random rolls, but you can come across tier 10 masterwork curated weapons that have been curated by Bungie to essentially be a god roll. This is a tremendously spectacular change that gives players something to quest after they've done everything and reached the max level. Even the raid weapons have random rolls in addition to the god rolls. I think this is a great change that will keep people grinding past the expiration date of any given content release. My only issue really is how shallow the perk pool is. I can't tell you how many times I've been playing with someone and we get the same weapon to drop, no big deal, but then we look at it and we have nearly identical rolls. The next system to see a significant overhaul was the investment system, everything from Masterworks to Infusion, and even leveling. Leveling past 500, the soft cap, is pretty much done exclusively through powerful gear drops. However, instead of your once a week set of drops, you have different things that will come up on a near daily basis that offer powerful rewards. However, there is a little bit of a catch to it. Basically, after a certain point, everything outside the Dreaming City that drops powerful gear is only a couple of levels above what you have, and Bungie still has that idiotic penalty in place to try to force you to play multiple different classes. So, if you just like playing a Titan and you just wanted to keep up with people while playing on a Titan, you're shit out of luck. You've got to have one of everything, and if you don't, well, too bad. I don't think this is a good way to do it. Yes, people can just transfer their gear from one character to another to power it up, and by making it class specific, where you have a hunter, a warlock, and a Titan, you kind of curb that by gimping them when it comes to armor. It's still stupid. It's stupid to force people to play something they don't want to play. But overall, the new power gear system is way better than it was. Until you kind of get to the end of the road and you're trying to level up the gear you like with the gear you don't like. It can get expensive. And Infusion doesn't even progress your Masterworks. So, for example, at tier 3, it would take one Masterwork core to level something up. But say I infuse my tier 3 with a tier 4 and I use the Masterwork cores to also infuse because you have to, well, you just burnt Masterwork cores and you leveled up your gauntlets that are tier 3 and they're still just tier 3. So you've got to choose between Masterworking something or leveling it up. That said, Masterworks are also randomly rolled on items. The Masterwork system in its current iteration is a huge step back from the first introduction, where when you got an item, you could pay to masterwork it, and then if you didn't like the masterwork, you could re-roll it. Well, you can't do that now. So, for example, that god roll that you got on a hand cannon, you finally got that hand cannon you wanted, but you looked at it, and it had stability as the masterwork. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you level that up to 10, it's gonna still be worthless. You can't re-roll it. You can't make it range. So, your god roll is not really a god roll. Overall, I do like the changes to the different economies and the different ways of leveling. However, the huge step back in the way Masterworks work is mind-boggling. I don't understand why they chose that, and I don't think anything about this DLC irritates me more than getting a real cool weapon or piece of armor, and it having a Masterwork I don't give a shit about, except for maybe the mod system. Speaking of the mod system is woefully unbalanced for what it's supposed to do, or at least what I thought it was supposed to do. Now, maybe I'm wrong here, but correct me in the comments below if you think I am. Now, I thought mods were supposed to be a way of kind of augmenting weapons and armor. Turns out Bungie doesn't think that. Not only are mods super expensive when buying them from Banshee, 10 mod components, and one mod breaks down into one mod component, but the drop rates for mods on pieces of armor or weapons is abysmally low. Now there is somewhat of a way to farm these mod components. When the Tangled Shore is the flashpoint, you can run the various Barron heroic missions over and over and over and over and over again, and you get a chance at getting mod components from the armor, but that's kind of it. Best case scenario, to get 10 mod components to buy one mod from Banshee, you're running these missions 10 times. That's the best case scenario. So while I do appreciate that I can break down a piece of gear and get that mod, and then break down that mod and use those components eventually, once I have enough, to buy specific mods from Banshee, the mod economy, the cost per mod, what you get for breaking down a mod, it's a waste of time, and it's insulting. But moving forward, onto something hopefully a little more happy. Gambit. Now, Gambit is the premier PvE PvP mode. It sets 2 teams of 4 against one another in a race to collect enough motes, the first to fill their bank with motes, which I believe is 75 motes per team, summons the primeval. The first team to kill their primeval wins. Best of 3 takes all. However, it's not just that simple. Occasionally, a portal will open, and this is where the PvP aspect starts. Once the portal opens, a player enters, and they either snipe you with Sleeper or get sniped with Sleeper. Yeah, the meta's kinda wonky right now. However, the portal will open, I think, every 20 seconds once your primeval has been spawned, and this is categorically one of the more annoying aspects of Gambit. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the portal opening every once in a while when the primeval is spawned on the other side of the map to allow the other team to catch up. That's fine, because if you kill somebody on the opposing team while their primeval is spawned, it will heal the primeval. Death heals the primeval. That's fine, I get it. However, it does get to a point where it's like, it's annoying, man. It feels like it's happening every couple of seconds, and you're just like, okay, well, we just got rid of the invader and they're back. And we just got rid of the invader and they're back. And we just got rid of the invader and they're back again, once again. Gambit is a diamond in the rough. It has a couple of issues. I think primevals can be burnt way too quickly. I think the invasion happens way too often. And I think there are some outliers in the sandbox that kind of destroy this powered up 1v4 dynamic, like Sleeper. Or that make invasion kind of a moot point, like Sleeper. Now, I'm not saying nerf Sleeper, in fact, I'll have a video about that at some point, but I do think that there are some outliers in the sandbox that will be tweaked for Gambit. It is what it is. Because if they did something like give the invader more resilience, well, then the invader's just going to be running around killing you with Sleeper. But if they don't, you get in and you get sniped by Sleeper. It's just Sleeper, Sleeper, and Sleeper. So something's gotta be done about it, I guess? I don't know, it's a complicated issue with a lot of layers, but I do think there's a nuanced approach. However, once we take that nuanced approach with one weapon, it's gonna be something else, because it's always something else. And I think people need to realize that. Overall, however, I do enjoy Gambit. I enjoy it a lot. I grinded a ton of Gambit to get the Malfeasance this weekend, and I don't regret it because I had a ton of fun. But after a couple hundred games of Gambit, if not more, you kind of see the flaws. Primevals get burned too easily, Sleeper's just way too dominant. Overall, I hope some of these issues are addressed, and I hope to see Gambit get way more support than Prison of Elders did in Destiny 1. Because after House of Wolves, it was shafted until it was brought back in Taken King, and it wasn't really changed for Taken King. So I really, really hope Gambit gets way more love than that. Because I really do think that this could become an industry standard type mode, much in the same vein that Horde modes did after Gears of War. Now, before I give my final Forsaken thoughts, I wanted to go ahead and talk about the murdering of Cayde 6. Something we really didn't touch on over the entirety of this review, because, simply put, it wasn't necessary. If Petrovenge would have called us up and said, hey, I need help in the Prison of Elders, and we went on a quest to defeat Uldren and the barons and free the queen. You could have done all of that without killing Cayde. The death of Cayde feels less like it was done for narrative's sake and more to make a statement. One trying to say that Destiny is now more serious than it's ever been, telling us to look, Bungie has killed the funny, look at what we made them do, instead of trying to balance the darkness with levity. They just gutted it all together. And at the end of the day, it really does feel like nothing more than a PR move that has some bearing on the story, but it wasn't earned and it didn't pay off. And you still could have had that last philosophical debate with Uldren about light and darkness and the nature of both of them, and you still could have been justified in having us kill Uldren because of what he did to all of the Awoken. I mean, that's why Petra is killing him, not because Cayde died. Well, not exclusively, I'm sure that's part of it, but I do get the feeling that Petra is using us and Cayde's death to seek her own revenge. But ultimately, you could have ended up in the same exact place without killing Cayde. The death of Cayde seemed to matter more to the players, seemed to matter more to the marketing than it did in the game. As with the exception of Banshee, who gives you the quest for the Ace of Spades, and it's a really good, really emotional quest, don't really say much. They have one screen of dialogue after you've beaten the main quest, and then it's business as usual. And some of the NPCs, like Lord Shaxx, Hawthorne, or Lord Saladin, don't even have dialogue for Cayde. Which is kind of funny because Lost Comrades is kind of Lord Saladin's thing, and he could talk shit about Osiris, and he could talk shit about Rasputin, but he couldn't say anything about Cayde? Really? Ultimately, I do think that killing Cayde 6, killing the face of Destiny, was a marketing gimmick. But Bungie's going to be in a lot of trouble moving forward because now they don't have that ace in the hole. And honestly, while the writing in Forsaken is much better than Destiny 2, Curse of Osiris, and Warmind, that's not really saying much. And I think Bungie, like I said, will be in trouble in the future if they don't figure out how to write compelling stories. Forsaken was entertaining, but I wouldn't by any metric call it compelling. Like I said at the start of this review, Destiny 2 Forsaken is objectively a mixed bag, but one I do find myself enjoying most of. Not all of, there are issues, and I've spent a significant chunk of time talking about them, running my voice raw doing so. In this review, I've been pointing out a lot of the negatives, even in things that I really liked. It had negative aspects, and I think that's rightfully so. Because, think about it. Forsaken's not what Destiny should be. It's damn close. Maybe it's what Destiny should have been a year ago. Maybe it is the best iteration of what Destiny has been so far. But it still has large issues that kind of seem nonsensical when you look at them. And the only way to keep improving Destiny is to point those issues out. Now, I've leveled on a lot of praise. I've probably leveled on a lot more negatives, but it is what it is. I want to see the game continue to grow and evolve and get better. I am, however, worried. I am worried that this is a case of broken clocks, or a case of Blur doing a lot of work, or High Moon Studios doing a lot of work, or the live team finally capitulating or getting what they wanted and doing what the community asked them to do. But not an indication of what Destiny's future will look like, just what it looks like now. Forsaken is a huge step in the right direction, but so was Taken King. So was Rise of Iron. But then again, the narrative outside the Grimoire has always suffered, and with Destiny 2, Bungie management just threw everything out the window and did what they wanted. So while Forsaken is a great experience, it's one of the best Destiny experiences we've ever had, I can't recommend it, not in good faith, and only the future will tell if this is a one-time thing, like Taken King was, or if this is a course correction. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and like always, stay frosty.